The freezing wind was already howling through the cracks of the hospital transit station when Dr. Vance ripped the portable heater straight out of Rose's trembling hands. He did not even look at her as she gasped for air and clutched her chest in pain. "You are nothing but a sickly freeloader, taking up space in my pristine facility." He spat the cruel words out while adjusting his expensive silk tie. "If you cannot pay your father's medical debts by tonight, you are out in the blizzard." Rose fell to her knees on the icy floor. She pleaded with him, explaining that her severe heart condition made the cold physically unbearable. She told him she just needed 5 minutes of warmth to keep her heart rate stable. Vance just laughed and told her that her weak heart was not his problem. He turned his back and walked away, completely ignoring the fact that a young woman might actually freeze to death on his watch. He truly believed that people without money were completely disposable. But what Vance did not know was that he was not the only one in the room. Standing quietly in the shadows near the vending machines was a man dressed in a faded electrician uniform. He was tightly holding the hand of a little girl who wore a high-tech portable dialysis backpack. That quiet mechanic was actually Edward Sterling. He was the billionaire CEO of the very medical conglomerate that funded Vance's entire hospital network. Edward had disguised himself to do a surprise inspection of the facility after hearing rumors of patient abuse. Life is the most sacred gift we are ever given. Please subscribe to our channel today to give strength to resilient hearts everywhere. Let us take a step back to understand exactly how Rose ended up in this nightmare. Rose was 22 years old and completely alone in the world except for her ailing father. Her father had spent his entire life working in the local stone quarry until his lungs finally gave out from the dust. Now, he was lying in a cramped ward upstairs, relying on expensive oxygen treatments just to survive another week. Rose was born with a severe congenital heart defect. Her doctors had constantly warned her to avoid extreme temperatures and heavy labor at all costs. But she simply had no choice. She took a job scrubbing floors and maintaining the outdoor heating cabins meant for stranded wildlife just to make ends meet. It was grueling, back-breaking work that paid absolute pennies. Dr. Vance knew exactly how desperate her situation was. Instead of helping her, he used her desperation to exploit her every single day. He forced her to work double shifts without any overtime pay. He constantly mocked her frail appearance and her shortness of breath in front of the other medical staff. He even threatened to cut off her father's oxygen supply if she dared to complain to the labor board about her stolen wages. Rose swallowed her pride and endured the daily abuse in absolute silence. Every single penny she made went straight to the hospital pharmacy to keep her father breathing. If you choose to let your courage conquer a difficult fate, please leave this declaration in the comments. I declare that every physical challenge is just a fire that forges my will, and my soul is always full of vibrant life. The storm outside the transit station was getting worse by the minute. The local weather station issued an emergency avalanche warning for the entire mountain pass. Inside the lobby, the temperature was dropping rapidly as the old windows rattled against the freezing wind. Vance was too busy preparing for a fake press conference to care about the failing heating system. He wanted to announce a massive breakthrough in thermal dialysis technology to impress his wealthy donors. The funny thing was, he actually stole that brilliant research paper directly from Rose's private locker. Rose had spent her lonely nights studying biomedical engineering books, trying to find a cheaper way to keep her father warm during his treatments. Vance found her brilliant sketches, slapped his own name on them, and submitted them to the Royal Swiss Medical Board for a massive cash prize. Suddenly, a massive wall of snow and ice crashed into the side of the transit building with a deafening roar. The violent impact shattered the thick glass doors and immediately knocked out the main power grid. Absolute panic erupted in the freezing lobby. Vance immediately grabbed his leather briefcase and pushed his way through the screaming crowd to reach his private armored vehicle. He completely abandoned his vulnerable patients and his loyal staff without a second thought. In the terrifying chaos, Edward's little girl was knocked away from him by the fleeing crowd. Her name was Lily. She suffered from severe selective mutism and depression after losing her mother a few years ago. Lily fell hard onto the snow-covered floor. The rough impact damaged the delicate battery pack on her life-saving portable dialysis machine. The machine started beeping frantically, signaling a critical power failure. The freezing air was rapidly shutting down her small circulatory system. Edward fought desperately against the stampede of terrified people to reach her, but he was trapped behind a heavy collapsed pillar. He screamed for someone, anyone, to help his little girl. People just kept running past her, too focused on their own survival to care, except for Rose. Rose saw the little girl shivering violently on the icy ground. She knew her own weak heart could easily give out if she exerted herself in the freezing cold. She knew stepping into that freezing draft could literally kill her, but she did not hesitate for a single second. Rose crawled across the broken glass and freezing debris, ignoring the sharp pain in her chest. She pulled off her own thin jacket and quickly wrapped it tightly around Lily's trembling shoulders. She used her own frail body weight to shield the child from the biting wind howling through the broken doors. Rose grabbed a small thermos of warm soup she had saved for her only dinner. She carefully fed it to the little girl, aggressively rubbing her freezing hands to keep her blood circulation going. The brutal cold was piercing right through Rose's chest like a million tiny needles. Her lips were turning a terrifying shade of blue. Her damaged heart was pounding erratically, warning her that it was rapidly failing. But she just smiled warmly at Lily and hummed a gentle, comforting lullaby over the sound of the raging storm. Edward finally managed to push the heavy concrete debris aside. He watched in absolute awe as this frail, abused janitor risked her own life to save a child she did not even know. He pulled out his phone and quietly recorded everything unfolding in the ruins. He recorded Vance fleeing the scene like a selfish coward. He recorded the stolen engineering blueprints sticking out of Vance's dropped folder on the floor. And he recorded Rose's incredible act of selfless, pure love. The simple, brave compassion of a sick girl warmed a child's freezing soul. Please write the declaration again. I declare that every physical challenge is just a fire that forges my will, and my soul is always full of vibrant life. The emergency rescue teams finally arrived a few long hours later. They managed to restore the backup generators and secure the freezing building. Rose completely collapsed from exhaustion and severe hypothermia the moment the medics rushed through the doors. It took 3 entire days for Rose to finally open her eyes. She woke up in a sterile hospital bed, her fragile chest aching with every single breath she took. Her very first thought was not about her own failing heart or her severe hypothermia. It was about her father. She frantically tried to pull the IV out of her arm, terrified that Vance had already thrown her sick father out onto the freezing streets. She knew her medical bills were piling up and she had completely failed to finish her shift. But what Rose did not know was that her life of suffering was already over. Halfway across the world, in a glittering, gold-plated ballroom in Geneva, Switzerland, Dr. Vance was having the absolute best night of his miserable life. He stood proudly at a grand mahogany podium, completely bathed in the bright glow of expensive crystal chandeliers. Hundreds of the world's most elite doctors, wealthy investors, and prestigious journalists were giving him a massive standing ovation. He was just minutes away from officially receiving the Royal Swiss Medical Award for his groundbreaking research in thermal dialysis technology. Vance adjusted his custom-tailored tuxedo and smiled warmly at the flashing cameras, perfectly playing the role of a humble, dedicated medical savior. He leaned into the microphone and delivered a sickeningly fake speech about how deeply he cared for the poor and vulnerable patients in his clinics. He boldly claimed that he had spent countless sleepless nights developing this technology just to keep freezing patients warm. The wealthy crowd clapped in absolute awe of his supposed genius and pure heart. But his moment of absolute stolen glory was about to be completely destroyed. The heavy, rhythmic thumping of a massive private helicopter suddenly echoed violently above the grand hall, rattling the expensive crystal glasses on the tables. Before the security guards could even react, the heavy oak doors of the ballroom were violently pushed open. The entire room fell into a dead, confused silence. A man walked right down the center aisle, exuding an aura of absolute, terrifying authority. He was no longer wearing the faded, dirty uniform of a transit station electrician. Edward Sterling was dressed in a pristine, midnight blue Armani suit, flanked by a dozen top-tier corporate lawyers and federal medical investigators. Vance's smug smile instantly vanished, completely replaced by a pale look of pure, unadulterated terror. He recognized the Billionaire CEO immediately, but he had absolutely no idea why the most powerful man in the medical industry was crashing his award ceremony. Edward did not even bother shaking hands with the confused event organizers. He walked straight up onto the grand stage, took the heavy gold medal right out of the presenter's hands, and dropped it onto the floor with a loud thud. He grabbed the microphone and looked Vance dead in the eyes with absolute disgust. "You like talking about keeping people warm, Vance?" Edward's voice echoed through the massive speakers, cold and sharp as a razor. "Let us show these good people exactly how you treat the vulnerable when you think nobody is watching." Edward snapped his fingers, and his security team immediately hijacked the massive projector screen behind the stage. The elegant slideshow of Vance's fake medical diagrams instantly vanished. Instead, the high-definition screen displayed the raw, terrifying security footage from the freezing transit station. The entire elite crowd gasped in absolute horror. They watched in crystal clear resolution as Vance ripped the vital heating tube away from a sick, frail girl. They listened to the crystal clear audio of him mocking her severe heart condition and threatening to let her father die. They watched the blizzard crash into the building, and they saw Vance forcefully pushing innocent patients out of his way to save his own miserable life. But the most damning piece of evidence was yet to come. The video zoomed in on the stolen research folder Vance had dropped in his cowardly panic. Edward's voice cut through the shocked whispers of the crowd. "You see that folder he dropped while running for his life? Those blueprints have watermarks from a local library printer, and the handwriting belongs to a 22-year-old janitor named Rose." Edward then pulled out a complex biomedical schematic from his suit pocket and slammed it onto the podium. "If you are the genius who invented this thermal dialysis unit, Vance, then explain to this room while the secondary heat coil bypasses the arterial filter. Vance started sweating profusely, stammering and stuttering, completely unable to answer the basic engineering question. He looked around the room, desperately begging his wealthy friends for help, but they were all looking at him with pure disgust. You cannot answer it because you did not write a single word of it. Edward signaled the federal investigators waiting at the bottom of the stage. Dr. Vance, you are officially fired from the Sterling Medical Conglomerate. You are being formally charged with gross medical negligence, severe labor exploitation, and grand intellectual property theft. Two heavy-set federal agents marched onto the stage, grabbed Vance by his expensive tuxedo, and forcefully slapped cold steel handcuffs onto his wrists. Vance began crying uncontrollably, begging Edward on his knees for a second chance, screaming that his entire reputation would be ruined. Edward just looked down at him and adjusted his cuffs. A weak heart is not my problem, Vance. With those final, satisfying words thrown right back in his face, Vance was dragged out of the ballroom in absolute disgrace as the cameras flashed, permanently cementing his total ruin. The greatest, most miraculous blessing finally wrapped around Rose like a shining pearl. Please comment this declaration to send her your blessings. I declare that every physical challenge is just a fire that forges my will, and my soul is always full of vibrant life. A few days later, Rose was sitting in a warm, comfortable, private suite at the finest cardiac hospital in the country. The door gently opened, and Edward walked in, holding the hand of little Lily. Lily was no longer looking down at the floor in depressed silence. The moment she saw Rose, the little girl dropped her father's hand, ran across the room, and hugged Rose tightly. For the first time in 3 years, Lily actually spoke, whispering a soft, tearful thank you into Rose's ear. Rose hugged the little girl back, tears of pure joy streaming down her pale cheeks. Edward sat down next to her bed, gently taking Rose's small, scarred hands into his own. He told her that her father had already been moved to a luxury respiratory clinic, fully paid for, and was recovering beautifully. He told her that her brilliant thermal dialysis design had just been officially patented under her own name, making her a millionaire overnight. And then Edward pulled a pristine, sealed medical envelope from his jacket. This is a fully funded $2 million grant for the best heart transplant surgeons in the world to give you a brand new, healthy heart. Before Rose could even process the overwhelming miracle, Edward gently wiped a tear from her cheek. But I am not just here as your investor. Rose, I am here because you saved my daughter's life. And in doing so, you saved mine. He offered her the prestigious position of global director for his medical charity foundation, ensuring no patient would ever be abused again. And as Lily smiled brightly beside them, Edward asked if he could have the honor of spending the rest of his life standing by her side, protecting the woman who had protected his world. Vance lost his license, his wealth, and his freedom, rotting away in a cold, concrete prison cell where no one cared about his name. But Rose finally got the beautiful, healthy life she always deserved, living happily in a warm, sunlit estate surrounded by the family she had always dreamed of. An iron will and true courage will always guide you through the darkest storms of destiny. Subscribe to the channel today to bring warmth and light into your life.